as well as because continue to comment on the situation and its impact on the nation.
Now, some experts on NTA's flagship program, that's Good Morning Nigeria, said the 2016 recession and that of 2020 are different in terms of their drivers and character.
And the guest Kinsley said the 2016 recession was induced by the collapse in oil market, while that of 2020 was caused by health crisis known as COVID-19 pandemic.
While some others argued that the 2020 recession is deeper than that of 2016, pointing out that some industries are already in depression. And such industries, of course, include transportation sector and hospitality.
But sure, notwithstanding, some guests are optimistic that the recovery from 2020 recession will be quicker, as there is positive development to that effect already.
Now, while this they attribute to some monetary and fiscal measures being undertaken by the government, and they include various intervention programs and schemes, the Finance Bill 2020, better planning and coordination amongst the policy makers on the different sides of the economic management.
The guest advocated review of border closure, greater implementation of economic sustainability plan, investment in special economic zones and agriculture, particularly dry season farming, infrastructure development, manufacturing and technology to make the recovery faster, and above all, ensure price stabilization.
Well, as experts believe that the negative impact of the recession is already being mitigated, how can the country sustain the momentum? Now, which critical sectors of the economy should be given attention for quicker results? What should be done to step up implementation of the economic sustainability plan? And what strategies are available to increase revenue generation? These are some of the issues we intend to examine as we continue our conversation on Nigeria's latest economic recession. It's Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we're broadcasting on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Good Morning Nigeria comes to you every weekday, that's Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and I welcome you to the program.
And I am Yusuf Nadabusumo, also welcoming you to Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. As usual, we have our complimentary segments, including the newspaper review, business news, and others. Let's now join Tessie Omeri for the morning news highlights. Good morning, Tessie.
Good morning and welcome to the morning news. 34 out of the 43 people killed by a person suspected to be Boko Haram terrorist on rice farm in Zabarmari village in Jere local government area of Borno State have been laid to rest. Governor Babagana Umar Zulum attended the funeral prayer, where he condemned the attack and stressed the need for enhanced collaboration with neighboring countries to end terrorism and senseless killings.
Our people are in very difficult conditions. They are in two extreme conditions. On one side, if they stay at home, they may be killed by hunger and starvation. They cannot go out to their farmlands because they should be killed by the insurgents. We shall re-strategize and ensure domination, entire domination of this area, the Zabaramari Gongolong, Koshebe exists. We shall ensure recruitment of more civilians, yet more hunters.
President Muhammadu Buhari has expressed grief over the killing of farmers on rice fields at Zamarbari in Jere local government area of Borno State, describing the terrorist killings as insane. In a statement, the president says the entire country is hurt by these senseless killings and prayed Allah to grant the souls of the departed eternal rest. He says his thoughts are with the bereaved families in this time of grief. President Buhari says all the needed support had been given to the armed forces to take necessary steps to protect the country's population and its territory. President Muhammadu Buhari will tomorrow roll out the much-awaited National Gas Expansion Program, NGEP, in Abuja. The event will herald the formal dispensing of autogas, CNG and LPG products at 2 NNPC retail stations. A statement by Garbaddin Muhammad, Special Assistant on Media to Minister of State Petroleum Resources, says the rollout is the culmination of the resolve of the President Buhari-led government to deepen domestic usage of natural gas in its various forms. It is also in line with the government's plan to make gas the first choice of source of cheaper and cleaner energy for Nigerians in their personal and industrial endeavors. Also at the event, the Minister of State Petroleum Resources will, on behalf of the federal government, hand over CNG-powered mass transport buses to the Nigeria Labour Congress as part of the agreement reached with Labour during negotiations and in recognition of the role organized Labour plays in the quest to bring relief to ordinary Nigerians. The federal government autogas program will deliver at least 1 million vehicle conversions by the end of 2021 and herald the clean energy transition for Nigeria and delivery of cheap transportation fuel. The nation's electricity grid in the early hours of Sunday, 29 November 2020, experienced multiple trippings, which led to the collapse of the system. A statement by the General Manager, Public Affairs Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, Ndidi Mba, states that TCN regrets the development and has since commenced grid restoration. The statement adds that power has been successfully restored to every part of the country except Calabar, Ugwaji, Makudi, Jos, Gombe, Yola and Maiduguri axes. Effort is, however, ongoing to ensure full restoration nationwide. TCN apologizes the inconvenience the system collapse has caused electricity consumers and assures that investigation will be conducted to establish the immediate and remote causes of the multiple trippings as soon as the grid is fully restored, considering that the grid had been relatively stable in the last couple of months. The 8th regular meeting of National Council on Communications and Digital Economy has added its voice to the advocacy on information communication technology (ICT) as a catalyst for sustainable socio-economic development of the country.
We have developed some policies and some master plan, one of which is our broadband plan 2020 to 2025. The idea is to cover up to 90% of Nigerians.
Participants at the media roundtable of the 6th National or Nigeria Family Planning Conference say population control is the way out if Nigeria must be counted among the economically viable countries of the world. They are also of the view that population control will reduce the rate of maternal mortality in the country.
This conference is the 6th in the series and has presented unique opportunities due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has caused tremendous upheaval to health systems around the world.
Family planning is very, very important, and we have seen just the decision of an individual or a family to take up family planning or contraceptive can affect and boomerang to the whole society.
And now to update on COVID-19. Latest figures from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control (NCDC) reveals 82 new cases of COVID-19 in 10 states and the FCT. These 82 new infections increased the total number of confirmed cases to 67,412, out of which Lagos has 48, Rivers 8, Kwara and Yobe 6, Katsina 5, FCT has 3, Nasarawa 2, while Plateau, Ogun, Kano and Osun confirmed 1 new case each. A breakdown of cases per state shows Lagos with 23,238. The FCT has 6,770 cases, while Plateau has so far confirmed 3,858 cases. 3,184 COVID-19 cases are currently active, with 63,055 recovered patients discharged and 1,173 deaths. And that concludes the morning news highlights. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Nadabu after this break. Good morning.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live from the Nigerian Television Authority. And now let's take our business segment. Nigerian government is calling for a downward review of retention ratio in view of Nigeria's Siemens electrification projects and Kano Maradi rail projects coordinated by KfW of Germany. There's more on business news with Chimobi Walter Naji.
The call for the review was made during the Nigeria-German bilateral government consultation and sectoral dialogue meeting. The consultation meeting, aimed at discussing the new German reform strategy, is an overhaul of the German development policy with its partner countries. The Minister of State for Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba, explained that the engagement will benefit Nigeria in different ways, including sustainable supply chain, improved health care delivery, and harnessing digital economy.
For us, there are a number of low-hanging fruits or opportunities in the agri area. A lot of people talk about increasing acreages, but for me, I think that anything that we do around reducing post-harvest losses, which currently is put to about 50 to 60%, will go a long way in increasing food production in the country.
Meanwhile, developing dynamic ecosystem to promote deep entrepreneurial culture and offer integrated business support, solutions and advisory startups for Nigerian youths has been described as veritable system of exiting the country out of recession. This is the focus of the Startup Africa training for young entrepreneurs holding from December 1st to 2nd, 2020 in Abuja.
Is it not alarming that shea butter, we produce a chunk of shea butter in this country, but we're not competitive because we don't have standards, we don't record our quality, and we cannot track. It's sad. Meanwhile, Ghana, some people take this shea butter, they quickly go and reclassify it in Ghana and export from there.
With business news, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. Many thanks, Chimobi, for the business package. Coming up next is newspaper review.
And as usual, Bayo Atoyebi is in the house. Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Yusuf. Good morning, Kinsley.
Yeah.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Welcome.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Yes, we hope you had a pleasant weekend.
Yes, very restful one.
Okay. Well, the lead story on the front pages of the two papers we had this morning on the mayhem in Borno. Anger spreads as UN says 110 Borno farmers killed. This is the Punch newspaper. That's a double-decker headline saying anger spreads as UN says 110 Borno farmers killed. And you have three riders to that headline. Several still missing as governor leads burial of 43 Borno farmers. Boko Haram still operating strongly in many parts of our state. That's attributed to Zulum, who is governor of the state. Rise up and protect yourselves against attacks, CNG tells northerners. And you can see the photographs there on the front page of the bodies of the rice farmers who were killed by Boko Haram insurgents on their farms in Borno State, and the burial took place yesterday. Now, let's go above the nameplate of the paper and say airlines hike fares by 100% as operating costs rise. And that's above the nameplate of the paper. Details on page 32. Airlines hike airfares by 100% as operating costs rise. Federal government plans 1 million gas-fired vehicles by 2021. TCN admits national grid collapse, plans probe. Grass-cutting fraud. EFCC rearranges ex-SGF Lawal today. And then two earpieces there beside the nameplate. Court restores oil field revoked by Kyari. awards $20 million damages. SANU opposes ASU's platform, demands share of 40 billion naira allowances. And again, let's return to the headlines and stories below the photographs there on the front page of the Punch. IAM backed out of defection over visit to Buhari. That's according to Umahi. Assassins attack Benue Prof. And that's on page 2. Rep pledges to fund Bauchi detainees skill acquisition training. 8 killed, and children missing in Cardinal communities' fresh attacks. Drunken cop detained and faces disciplinary action and psychological evaluation. Gombe plans to integrate Almajiri education into school system. Adabo.
Well, the stories are not so much very different here on Daily Trust, but all the same, let's see on page 20 of Daily Trust, there is an outage as power grid collapses. The Nigerians to pay 4,000 naira monthly for solar system from the presidency, that is. That's going to be on page 8. And at the bottom you find Umahi's defection renews Mutawalli's quest to join the APC. Details on page 32. And 7 killed in fresh Kaduna attacks. Also, kidnapper mistakenly boards victim's vehicle in Sokoto Park. And these stories, details can be found on page 6. The main story, and that is the trending one now, is the insecurity. Insecurity, farmers abandoning harvest, that's going to be on page 4. The death toll hits 110 as 43 are buried is the main story on Daily Trust. And the writers are, Boko Haram slaughtered my 2 children in my presence. We foresaw attack after arresting insurgents, the villagers say. And we are in difficult situation. That's the governor of Borno State saying that, Governor Zulu. And then the other writer is Nigerians, UN express anger. Details of this in Daily Trust can be found on page 5. Kingsley, this story, it's harrowing, it's terrible. The pictures too really speak volumes of how insecure we've become these days. And looking at, the theater of the whole operation, farms, and these kind of places, for God's sake.
It's the most cruel thing that has happened. In fact, the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator says that in the last decade since the activities of Boko Haram, this is one of their worst attacks throughout that theater of war. I mean, farmers were on the farm ready to harvest their maize, their rice. Not only did they arrest them and kill them, they also burnt off the rice in the farm.
Yes.
And not only that, according to a report by the UN Humanitarian Coordinator, it says some women and children were also kidnapped and taken away from that scene. And President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the killing, describing it as the action of the terrorists as insane. And he has also emphasized that the entire country is hurt by this senseless killing, and his thoughts are with the families. But something has to be done drastically. Governor Zulum was there physically to see the burial of the 43 that initially took place. But as a last count, they are talking about 103 persons that have been killed. And Governor Zulum has warned that Boko Haram is no longer in the fringes of Lake Chad. They are present in several locations in Borno State. So it means that all the gains we've had over the years and the impression that they had been confined to the fringes of Lake Chad means that they are gradually gaining re-entry back into Nigeria. It's a very sad situation.
Very sad, but I don't know. The question is, what should and can be done? Governor Zulu himself, if you recall, has been attacked by Boko Haram elements.
On
and some
three different instances.
on security details attached to him, unfortunately lost their lives. And you just have this as, it just leaves one speechless. What should and can be done? That's the next step. We have had a lamentation, so what next?
See, there have been so many calls really by people to, overhaul the security architecture and the structure of this country. But I think the president himself has come out now to start looking or pointing towards that direction, because yesterday he said he has given almost everything required by the armed forces and the Nigerian military to do whatever it takes in order to, rid these terrorists out of the country.
You see, we are not fighting a conventional war. If it's a conventional war, the enemy is there, you are here, and you are facing each other. These are people who come and strike and disappear. And so the strategy to fight them must also change. It shouldn't be conventional warfare. They are adopting guerrilla tactics. And from all indications, it's not just renegade religious persons in Boko Haram. They're apparently now experts from other parts of the world under ISIS that have infiltrated our region. And unless something is done very, very drastically, we will be overwhelmed. That is the danger there.
And then we will know that in the northeast, the military have had their positions attacked and sacked, and some of their personnel, unfortunately, also killed. And then you come over to the northwest, and you see what is happening with bandits. And kidnappers. Of course, you've heard what happened in the last couple of days in the southwest, Ekiti and Ondo axis, and indeed, the continuing incident. So the question should be, what should be done? And I think that is very important. That should be the critical focus. We can't be having these regular reports of, because when you just look at the coffins and the dead bodies, as a human being, you have cold shivers, so-called goose pimples. But this time, you just say, what's the meaning of this? And if this becomes their approach, then you have to ask yourself what impact that will have on the nation's food security. Already in the northwest, you do know that there's protection racketeering, first for you to go and cultivate, and then for you to even harvest. So, I don't know.
The food security issue is the major problem now, because it's a double-edged sword now. Having to kill people and then get to the farms, even, as you said, not even killing them, but having to burn their own produce, which they are working on. I mean, it's really disturbing.
It's horrendous. Luckily, though, talking about bandits, a bandit was arrested in Kano. He had come to the motor park and boarded a transport to travel from Kano to, I think, Katsina. Unfortunately for him, a driver he kidnapped 2 months ago, he boarded his car. The driver identified him, immediately notified the National Union of Road Transport Workers Union. They changed the driver and quickly notified the police. He was sitting in the car. As the car was driving, the police stopped him and they brought him out, took him to the police station. When they cross-examined him, he apparently confessed that, yes, he's been a kidnapper. And his name, he gave his name. Immediately the driver came, who is now the witness. He confirmed, he told his name is Hadari. And he confirmed exactly the name he gave to the police. Absolutely. That's how he was arrested. So you can see the courage. He's so bold that he doesn't care.
Precisely, right? Decides to go about in public transport. That's part of the audacity that you find around. I mean, in the past, criminals normally will put on a mask to disguise themselves. But these days, it was in your face.
Are you not sure he was not in the car? He would call on the phone and say, I want to ease myself, and they stop, and then his colleagues will come out.
Absolutely.
It could have been another.
That's right. That could have been another plan. Yes. Another plan.
And that is making everybody apprehensive. The Kaduna-Abuja highway has been virtually abandoned. Last Friday, I had the cause to travel to Kaduna. I was at the railway station. And passengers who had been at the railway station as early as 5:30 could not get ticket for 7 o'clock train. They got ticket for 10 o'clock train. By the time the 10 o'clock train that I intended to board arrived, there was a near riot situation at the railway station. Passengers were impatient. They couldn't wait because, can you imagine that there are 6 ticket selling points? Then you have 2 people selling at the ticket points. There are people there in several queues. So one chap will come and sell tickets for a few here, a few here, a few here, and later on they just announce to the people, tickets are finished. So passengers completely lost their cool, and there was almost a near riot situation. But the good news is that After that frustration, I had to travel to Kaduna by road. But almost at various strategic positions, I identified and I saw security men on the highway. And the advice from the drivers is that don't travel too early on that highway, don't travel too late. If you travel, at least there are enough security men on the highway. But one begins to wonder, if you remember when Abuja airport was closed and people had to fly to Kaduna and be freighted by train to Kaduna, there was a heliport at Regina, which was helping the security to monitor the highway. What has become of that?
Well, yes, but I don't know. I mean, it's everywhere you go, the topic is insecurity in different parts of the country, and something should be done. I think that's the critical thing.
That's the bottom line.
That's the critical thing. I mean,
People are waiting for
North
something
Central,
to be done.
Northwest, South, everywhere.
Yeah.
Something has to be done. The bandits have to be brought to heel. And I recall I asked this question at some point. What probably could be the strategic objective? Because some of these criminal elements, it is not just out of poverty. Is there somebody somewhere, or are there persons somewhere who have brought in these elements? And it looks like some of these characters are not even Nigerians.
Yes.
Are not Nigerians. Yes. Is this a destabilization strategy? What are we reading? And therefore, how are we responding to it? I mean, look, you see what is happening in the Northwest, for instance. This year, we've had the issue with flooding. You have bandits, you have all kinds of kidnappers and so on and so forth.
Already the consequences are here. Foodstuffs are becoming very expensive. Ordinary onion that used to be available and cheap, available to even the ordinary man, is now beyond the reach of everybody. But meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police has warned that if people are planning another violent protest, the police says we are prepared and ready for them. The Inspector General of Police, who briefed all commandants and commissioners of police of the 36 states of the Federation and the FCT, said that there won't be any repeat of the violent protest we saw. It's a peaceful protest, yes, it is allowed, but violent protest, never. We want every Nigerian to work with us to prevent what happened at the end of SARS protest. He directed commissioners of police to review their security architecture. They are to prepare and provide him their operational order by 1st of December. This is to ensure that we have a peaceful Yuletide.
Well, that's a good order there, Bayo, and we must thank you really for being part of this show this morning. It's our pleasure you've come. We'll see you tomorrow again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We shall now take a quick break. We will be back with the discussion proper and then get you the details about Nigeria's, recession. Good Morning Nigeria is reaching you live from the Nigerian Television Authority, and we're discussing, Nigeria's recession, rather continue our discussion on the recession in the country. And to begin the program, let's have, a look at the excerpts from the initial discourse put together by Abdulsalami Jibril.
Broadly similar, but deeper now. And more pervasive than 2016. Because whilst on the surface you are looking at minus 6.10 second quarter and minus 3.23, yeah, that's a number. It's still deeper than just under 2%, in 2016.
Most economic activities in various sectors, excepting perhaps in the area of agriculture and food production and the health sector. Even the transport sector also was largely closed down. Under such a situation where goods and services that were previously being produced are no longer being produced, and businesses are shut, workers are at home, then there is no question of talking about increase in output. Output or gross domestic product must necessarily reduce.
In terms of expectation, looking at predictions by international organizations and even our own MBS here, I think the outturn is relatively positive. The IMF actually projected an 8%, for our third quarter. The World Bank projected a 5-point-something%. MBS projected 6%. And so, and of course, the outturn is 3.62% now. So at this figure, I think there's relative improvement. It's better than projected by pundits, as it were.
This recession could have been more dangerous if it came in the middle of the year when there was lockdown. But it is very fortunate for the economy to have it when the economy is reopened. So, and that is exactly when the economy is breathing. So I think also this instrument, the central bank, what the central bank need to do more is to make sure that there is price stability. Any economy that does not have stable prices is plunged to be part of this economic cycle that is not friendly at all.
All right, so those were excerpts from the first part of our conversation on Nigeria's latest economic recession. We had a conversation, of course, on Friday last week, and today we are continuing. Joining us for today's conversation, we would like to welcome the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Hajia Zainab Ahmed. She is joining us via Zoom. Honorable Minister, pleasure to have you with us this morning.
Hello, good morning. Good morning, Nigeria. Thank you.
And from Kaduna Network Center, we are being joined by Professor Yushau Ango. He's a professor of finance and entrepreneurship at Kaduna State University and one of our regular economic and financial analysts. Prof, delighted to have you this morning.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And also joining us from Lagos via Zoom is Dr. Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Good morning and good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you very much. And in our studio here, we have Professor Uche Waleke, Professor of Economics and Capital Market. He's a former Commissioner of Finance, Imo State. He has been one of us all this while. You're welcome, Prof. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, too. I'm delighted to be here. Good morning, Nigeria.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Let's get started with the Honorable Minister out there. Let's see how far we can get the information from you. Looking at the situation on the ground, the recession is on. Let me start by congratulating you for being calm and cool in this regard, because they say, uneasy lies the head that wears the crown. And of course, there it goes. Nigeria is in recession, but the trending phrase so far, as we captured since last week from your direction from your office, is that this recession, which is coming just the second one in, in this administration lifetime, is not going to last long. In your own words, it's going to be short-lived. Now, what is giving you that optimism, or what's prompting that optimism that this recession is going to be short-lived?
Well, thank you very much. Again, good morning to all Nigerians. Truly, Nigeria is technically in recession. But if you look at the trajectory, between the second quarter and the third quarter of 2020, the economy actually grew by 12.1%. Moving from a negative growth of minus 6.1% to minus 3.62%. So the direction is a positive one. For us, it's an indication that the measures that have been put together and are being implemented are working. And that's why we have this optimism, but also an assessment that Nigeria will exit recession, if not in the fourth quarter of 2020, at least by the first quarter of 2021. There are a number of sectors that are growing. Despite the fact that we've gone into recession, the agricultural sector is growing, so is the financial services, the IT sector. Transportation is, on the other hand, is affected, and food, the other sectors that are also not doing well, including the oil and gas sector. But a good number of the non-oil sectors, including industry and services, are growing. So all we have to do is to concentrate and make sure that the sectors that are growing continue to grow and to enhance our resilience and our capacity to not only recover, but continue to grow on an incremental basis until we get to the point when the growth actually has a positive impact on the lives of Nigerian citizens. Again, let me say that this recession is a COVID-19 engendered recession, plus the crash in the crude oil price. This economy was growing for 3 years consistently until this pandemic happened. Fact is, we're not alone. There are a lot of other economies, developed economies, emerging economies that have gone into recession. There is none of these economies that have gone into recession that have numbers as low as the Nigeria Q3 minus 3.62%. Our reports have indicated that the South African economy went into recession in the second quarter of 2020 by as deep as minus 50%. UK has gone into recession, so has the US, so has Canada, so has Norway, Netherlands, Mexico. There are so many countries that have gone into recession. Nigeria has outperformed our own predictions. Nigeria has outperformed the predictions of the World Bank and the IMF and other institutions that thought that the recession would be as deep as 8%. So we're very hopeful that if we continue to push the programs and projects that we have defined in the Economic Sustainability Plan and in the ERGP, that this recession will be short-lived and that Nigeria will be way on its path to growth again.
Honourable Minister, thank you very much. The key response plank of the administration to the coronavirus pandemic is encapsulated in the Economic Sustainability Plan. The details are fairly well known, and you are riding on that crest to get out of the recession in your optimistic projection. But what must we not do if we are to get out of recession as quickly as we came in?
Well, to begin with, we should work towards having peace and harmony, because the disruptions of the COVID-19 meant that businesses and trade came to a standstill, and security has that potential also of slowing down growth. So we must make sure we have peace and harmony in the polity, and we must continue to enhance the ease of doing business. We must continue to provide succor and buffer for businesses to continue to operate. What we've also done is we're not increasing any taxes at all whatsoever. Instead, we're reducing taxes. We're reducing some duties and levies, all with a view of enhancing the capacity of businesses to thrive and to continue to produce so that they can employ more people and not disengage people from their own work. So we must also continue to support the agricultural sector, industries, and service, the service sector. All of these things are in the medium-term economic plan, the ERGP, but also in the ESB. And we're also extending the same principles of and philosophy of partnering with the private sector, supporting business in the new development plan that we're currently working on. We should also make sure that working in partnership with the monetary authorities, the trade authorities, and the fiscal authorities together, we must have a cohesion in the works that we do, that efforts are not fragmented, and build our reserves to ensure that we have fiscal buffers for this crisis and also for the future, because there might be other crises in the future. And also we must make sure that we reduce inflation and reduce the cost of transportation, which is the greatest component in inflation today, reduce the cost of transportation that will have the impact of reducing the cost of food and making life better and easier for our people.
Honorable Minister, Madam, can we get more information, rather, would you shed more light for us on the economic recovery measures being adopted by the central bank and invariably by the federal government in your ministry as such? The governor of the central bank recently, precisely over the weekend, was it Friday, said the economic recovery measures are being implemented and they are at advanced stage of implementation. And they are, of course, yielding positive results. Shed more light on that for us, for Nigerians. Maybe that could allay some of the fears among the people on this recession.
So on the fiscal side, what we've done is we've taken measures to make sure that there's fiscal stability within the country and that we're implementing a regime to reduce taxes, reduce the burden of business implementation. We're putting in place, together with the monetary authorities, a 15 trillion naira infrastructure company that will be fully and independently managed. This will be a company that will have the capacity to raise financing locally, internationally, on its own to help us build infrastructure. We're also working to reduce import duties and levies, specifically on vehicles, on trucks, on mass transit vehicles to reduce the cost of transportation. Because transportation cost has a significant input into the cost of food projection, we're also making provisions to reduce, further reduce taxes on small businesses. Last year in the 2019 finance bill, we had reduced taxes from 30% to 20% for medium businesses and from 30% to 0% to small businesses. So further, this year we're also removing the need for those small businesses to pay education tax, which is currently put at 2%. So all of this to enable these businesses retain the resources that they have so that they can continue to invest in their businesses. We also are working conscientiously to continue to diversify the economy. And if you look at the GDP report, you will see that it's working because the oil sector contributes now around 8.7%. The non-oil sector is the larger proportion of our economy today. We have to strengthen the non-oil sector so that we don't continue to depend on export only from the oil sector of the economy. We need to be able to earn foreign exchange from other sources other than the oil and gas industry. We need to also continue to strengthen the partnership between the federal government, the state government, and the private sector so that we're working together and delivering the growth that we all desire. But so also is the need to make sure that we have a stable macroeconomic environment, that inflation is reduced, that the exchange rate is stable, that our balance of payment position improves, and that we have positive current account balances. These are measures that we are working together with the monetary authorities to make sure that the fiscal buffers that are low have been rebuilt, because that is what will enhance our capacity to deal with this crisis and any other subsequent crisis that might also arise in the future.
Okay, Honorable Minister, thank you very much. One more time, just to repeat, for a good number of analysts, the recession didn't come as a surprise. There were clear indications that this was going to happen. But we already have the 2021 appropriation bill still being considered by the National Assembly. In what ways might the official recession now impact on the major planks of the 2021 budget and also the key assumptions? I'm looking, for instance, at let's say our borrowing plan, the huge deficit that is embedded in that budget, and going forward, what is the government likely to do? Might it shift its position or just ride along with its ongoing plans and programs to overcome the recession?
Well, thank you very much. Remember that in March this year, we were the first, through the National Bureau of Statistics, that made the assessment that said Nigeria was going to go into recession. Our report at that time was that the recession would be minus 4.4 year-end 2020. From all indications, it's going to be much, much better than that. You can see from what has happened in Q3 2020, the average inflation, the average contraction for the 3 quarters so far is minus 2.18%. So when we review the medium-term expenditure framework for 2020 to 2022, when we prepared the 2021 budget, when we prepared the next medium-term plan for 2021 to 2022, we had all of this in mind. Our assessment was that we were going to have a negative growth of minus 4.4% in 2020, and that we will recover somewhere midway in 2021. So we already took this fact into account because we saw that it was clearly going to happen. So we don't need to adjust the appropriation bill that is already before the National Assembly because we already took in all these factors into account. In the costings that we have done, in the revenues that we have projected, we took that in. And in fact, that is the reason why we have another wide deficit, similar to what we have in the amended 2021, because we're projecting that revenues will still be low, because 2021 year is going to be a period of recovery. So the government businesses will be recovering, but the recovery will be slow. It won't be a fast-track process in 2021. So we took that into account. We also made sure that expenditure that were not essential were also not provided in 2021. One can do some things in 2022. Not everything has to be done in 2021. And 2021 has also been looked at. We're looking at borrowing largely locally, and some component of it will be concessional loans from international financial institutions. We've also factored in financing that will be coming from privatization. My ministry is currently working on unlocking liquidity within the Nigerian economy. We have a lot of assets that are not contributing to the Nigerian economy, what economists will call dead assets. So we have to look at what we can privatize, what we can revalue, and actually book them in our accounts so that it improves our gearing ratios. We also need to look at the possibility of restructuring our debts to provide for us more breathing room in this trying times when revenues are low, to reduce the debt service obligations for this current years. For the 1, 2, 3 years, we need some relief, and then restructure and extend the repayment period of facilities. So a number of measures that we're taking side by side, reviewing laws that are allowing leakages, reviewing laws to allow relief to several sectors of the economy, unlocking liquidity, identifying assets, registering them, planning to sell some off or lease some off to unlock liquidity. So for 2021, while we will be borrowing, we'll also be concentrating a lot on trying to realize revenues that are non-debt. So we're working to realize revenues that are non-debt. That will still bring the liquidity that we need to run the economy.
Still on the 2021 appropriation, which is the budget. Earlier, you were talking about some of the incentives that we will be seeing. That's a reduction in the cost of in the rates applicable for import duties on vehicles because you identified transportation costs as a major impact on the rate of inflation in the country. Some others have also identified the cost of maintenance of vehicles on account of the state of a number of our highways. Now, a couple of weeks or so ago, Honorable Minister, you did say that perhaps we have to take a look again as to how we finance and fund our road projects, that rather than trying to do too many roads at the same time and therefore having little impact, perhaps we just look at major arterial roads, focus on those major arterial roads, one or two, exhaust them, and then move on to the next. Is this likely to play out in 2021?
That is my view, and the view of most of us in government now, that it is better to concentrate on a few projects, get them done, major, whether it's major roads or rail. It's better to take a few, do them, and get them completed, instead of having so many and trying to do all of them at the same time and spreading your resources really, really thin. That is what has happened in this country years over year, year after year. But to do this effectively, we have to be able to get the buy-in of the parliament and buy-in of the people. Because what happens is everybody wants to see in the national budget a road to his own community, a road in every local government. Instead of us concentrating to say, okay, in every state, let's have one major road that the federal government is. So we have all these roads spread. And the budget process is a consultative one, in the sense that the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning just says, this is the funding that is available, and this is what is available for this sector, for this ministry, department, or agency. The ministries now are expected to look at the priorities, following the priorities of government, and define those projects. So we do these budgets. Most of the time, even from the executive, the projects are spread thin. But when it goes to the parliament, they are spread thinner still. So that is something that we have to work on, but it has to be a collective effort. It's not something that the ministry alone can do, or the executive alone can do. We have to engage the people, let people understand that resources are really limited. But apart from trying to really refine and prioritize, we're also engaging in other processes to be able to finance infrastructure, including roads. The InfraCo that I spoke about, the infrastructure company, will be selecting roads that are commercially viable, or roads or rail that are commercially viable, and building them to recover from them. We've also enabled the private sector to select roads that are impactful, to build with their own resources, and then they recover their investment from tax credits over a period of time. The National Investment Authority, the National Sovereign Investment Authority, also has been assigned some 5 major infrastructure projects that they are building from the national sovereign wealth, in addition to budget funding that are provided to them. They also have an opportunity, and they have been able to raise funds from other investors and IFC to enhance the pool of funds, so that as we're building the second Niger Bridge, the Abuja, Kaduna-Kano Road, the Lagos-Ibadan-Kano Railway, Mambila Power Project, the East-West Road, we're assured that there's funding for those projects, and all that we have to do is to make sure that the projects are implemented properly with very high quality.
Honorable Minister, we thank you so much for appearing on Good Morning Nigeria today. It's our pleasure, and then I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak again to Nigerians. Thank you.
Minister. Good Morning Nigeria now continues with some of our guests. We have right here in our studio Professor Uche Waleke, Professor of Economics and Capital Market. He's a former Commissioner of Finance in Imo State. Prof, let's get started with you with, this optimism being expressed by the Honorable Minister that this very recession will be short-lived, given the fact that some recessions can be severe and milder. I mean, severe and some are milder. And then normally, statistics has it that recessions normally last about 11 months. And if it so goes that it could be less, it could be more. But given what the minister is putting across, it seems like this could not take up to 5 months or so, because she's even talking about end of the fourth quarter or in the first quarter of 2021. Do you share that optimism?
Well, let me start by saying that a recession is nothing but simply downturn in economic activities. And technically speaking, when you have a negative growth in GDP for 2 consecutive quarters and more, you have a recession. And a quarter, as you know, is 3 months. So for us to be in technical recession, it means the contraction will have happened for 6 months. Okay. Now, of course, it's possible for the economy to recover soon after falling into recession. That's when you have the V-shaped recession. So it goes and it quickly comes up. And when it drags for some quarters, say 5 to 8 quarters, depending on the literature you're reading, you have a U-shaped recession, as we had in 2016, 2017. So this one now, from every indication, appears to, is likely to be, a V-shaped one. And that is because, number one, I think, just as many people do, that the contraction has bottomed out. It has reached its, lowest level. That was in Q2 of 2020 at 6.11%. Now that we have another negative growth rate of minus 3.62, okay, so it points to the fact that we have seen the worst. The worst case scenario has played out. Okay. So the economy has gradually returned, on a growth path. And if you also look at the numbers, you would find that some sectors are still in the negative territory. Many sectors, as a matter of fact, trade, particularly trade, manufacturing, and so on. But these sectors, performed relatively better than we had in Q2. Another point I also want to make is this, that if you look at the Q2 figure, the oil sector contracted by about 6.63%, oil sector. The non-oil sector about 6.05% of 6 years, Q2. But in the Q3, the oil sector contracted by more than 13% in Q3. So, and the non-oil sector fell by about 2.5%.
Keep breaking this Q something for Nigerians to understand. Second quarter,
yes.
Second quarter, third
yes,
quarter,
second
right?
quarter and third quarter.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is this, that in spite of the deep contraction in the oil sector, deeper contraction relative to the second quarter in Q3, the economy was still able to show that improved result. Okay, so what that tells us is that the non-oil sector has strong potentials to actually drive this economy. The oil sector contraction we had in quarter 3 was because of a reduction, partly because of reduction in average daily oil production, from 1.81 in quarter 2 million barrels per day to 1.67 million barrels per day so because production fell and price also fell, okay, so we had that deeper contraction. But the non-oil sector now moderated that contraction, such that we are now having a situation of a contraction that is lower. So I am optimistic that going into the next quarter, okay, I want to share with the optimism of those who say by first quarter of next year, okay, we are likely to be out. But we could, the numbers, could even get better, much better by the end of 2020. Okay, and that's because what we have seen from experience is that the last quarter of the year, because it's usually associated with a flurry of activities, okay, I expect, for example, the transport sector to receive a boost this period as we go into the festive season. I expect trade contributes about 14% of GDP. And so I expect trade to improve the more in this last quarter of the year. So when you now see these other sectors expanding because of activity level increasing, the GDP is also likely to increase. So the contraction we are likely to have in the last quarter of the year is expected to be smaller than what we had in third quarter. So such that although first quarter of every year is usually not as strong as the last quarter of the previous year, we saw that happen in 2019, for example. The last quarter of 2019 recorded 2.55% growth in GDP, in real GDP, and that was the strongest we had in 2019. Then in first quarter of 2020, it fell to 1.87, growth in GDP, still positive. So the point I'm making is the last quarter of 2020 is likely to be strong, okay, because as I said, recession is downturn in activities, and when you have a boost in activity level in sectors, across, you are likely to have an improved performance, over the previous quarters.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Uche Waleke. Let's bring in Dr. Muda Yusuf. You saw him a while ago. He's with us via Zoom from Lagos. Dr. Muda Yusuf is Director General of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry and one of our regular economic analysts. Dr. Muda Yusuf, you listened to the Honorable Minister of Finance, and a moment ago, Professor Uche Waleke was speaking. Now, the impression that is out there is that this recession is not as gloomy as the name sounds technically. What's the view from those who are in industry and in commerce?
Thank you very much. And once again, good morning. First, let me commiserate with our brothers and sisters in Borno State over the incidents of the murder and the killings that took place recently. It's very heart-rending, and it also speaks to the need for us to scale up on the security challenges that we are facing as a country, which, by the way, also has a major impact on business and efforts to ensure that we ensure recovery of the economy. Well, the situation for us in business is quite challenging. We don't share as much optimism as what the Honorable Minister has said. But I want to share the view of the Minister and Prof that perhaps the worst is over. We are coming from a contraction of 6.1 to a contraction of 3.62. So that we can say that the worst is over. But what is most important in all of this? Sometimes it's not even so much about the numbers. Otherwise, to some Nigerians, these numbers are just academic. What is important is what is happening to poverty and what is happening to business performance. Because as far as the ordinary man on the street is concerned, the only indication that an economy is improving is when the welfare impact is felt. The poverty situation has been becoming more intense. We are now in a situation of what economists call stagflation. We have an economy that is stagnating, and we are also experiencing high inflation. So we have an environment where incomes are dropping, unemployment is high, and prices are rising. So it's a multiple jeopardy for the average Nigerian. So the kind of intervention which I like to see are partly what the minister said, but we need to look at the variables that impact directly first on businesses and on the citizens, because of the situation of poverty that we have. You saw what happened during the NSAS protests and all of that. Of course, there was a criminal dimension to what happened, but there was also a social dimension to it. The level of social discontent, the level of deepening poverty and all of that. These are the things I think we should address. From the business point of view, what is most critical is to inspire confidence in investors. We need policies that inspires confidence. As we all know, the government doesn't have the resources to properly reflect this economy. The government doesn't have the resources to properly turn around this economy. So the salvation, the main hope that we have is to ensure that we create the environment for private capital to come into this economy. Either private capital from within the economy or private capital from outside the economy. Those things are key, and those are the things that can really make a difference. The budget is just about 13 trillion or so, and at the end of the day, in terms of the actuals, it will be far, far less than that. So we should create the environment that will allow investors to come in here and put their money here. First, from the policy point of view, our foreign exchange policy needs to inspire confidence in investors. As I speak to you now, many investors are facing serious challenges with regard to, access to foreign exchange. Not all of them are so heavily import dependent, but if you are in a production, even if the import component of production is just 10%, if you don't have that 10%, you cannot move on. It's about complete crisis now in foreign exchange market. There's a lot of uncertainty. Investors are not clear exactly what is happening and so on. So we need to ensure that we put our foreign exchange system right to inspire confidence, to make sure that we have more investment, to make sure that we have more capital flow into this country. And let me give you an example. Recently, we have some challenges in the area of the non-oil exports. There's a policy currently that if you get your export proceeds, you will get it converted for you at 386 naira to the dollar, or even less. The open market rate for dollar is over 400. And because of this challenge, there have been all sorts of issues about compliance with NXP and all of that. And for the past 1 month, the non-oil exports investors have been facing a lot of crisis at the ports. They couldn't load their cargo. There was issue with the issue of compliance with NXP form. There was the issue of porters not being connected, being able to connect to CBN portal. Custom issue, shipping company issues. Some of those cargoes have even gone back. So the point I'm making is that we need to ensure that whatever policy we put in place encourages people that we bring in money. Policy around the exports and export policies is not supporting exports. If anything, it's working in the opposite direction. We expect that whoever is exporting should have free access to its export proceeds. Then we have people who want to bring in money, foreign direct investors, portfolio investors. If you don't have an exchange rate that is unified, that is market driven, it will be difficult to attract this investment into the economy. And we need this investment. So we need to tidy up the issue of the foreign exchange market very quickly. It's a very, very important thing to do. Then our institutions must also be supported. What the investors are going through at the ports is incredible. It's very frustrating. Well, the Honorable Minister has left, but I would like this message to get to her. We should find a way to ensure that we have a dispute resolution mechanism between importers, between manufacturers, and the Nigerian Customs Service. Because we are going through a lot of problems. Each time the cargo comes, because they say they want to achieve some revenue targets, there's an arbitrary revaluation of the value of the items, sometimes arbitrary classification, and you go through here to be able to get redress. And there is no proper mechanism to even get redress. Because if you have an issue with customs, you still go back to complain to the same customs. So we need an independent body that will resolve disputes between those of us in the private sector and the Nigerian Customs Service, so that we don't have a situation where the accuser is also the judge. So some of these issues are very important. Of course, you have talked about the issue of security. How do we invest with the kind of security environment that we have? You saw what happened in Borno State, and this is becoming an issue all over the country. It is affecting investment in a very big way. Because when we talk about economic recovery, it's not just only about these macro issues. It's also about the totality of the environment that inspires confidence. This security situation is deteriorating, especially coming from the period of the NSAS up till this moment. It is deteriorating, and it's affecting investment. If you want to do business, you think of your safety first.
Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you so very much for these insights. And of course, you've raised a lot of issues there, ranging from, that really hinges on the commerce side and the industry, importation of goods and services, and of course, talking about what is there for the common man. Now, these are valid issues, which of course I would want you, Shao Ango, there in our Kaduna studio, to react to them. When we look at issues raised by, Dr. Muda, these are issues that, touches the lives of the common man. These are issues that, makes the common man feel as if there is, so there is no recession, whichever way. But now it so seems as if there are so many other factors that could be added to this, which will really make the common man feel as if he is not also insulated from this recession. And some of these are issues like the border closure, and of course the insecurity, the food insecurity issue, and the compoundment of all this that brings about some hardship to him and or to her, and try to maybe instill some fear, because normally recessions bring about fear, loss of job, inflations, and the rest of them. How would you react to this? How would the common man feel as if something is in the offing for him?
Good morning once again. I think Dr. Muda has brought a lot of issues which are interesting to look at. Certainly for the poor man, what matters most in times of like this is availability of food and other services, that are at a reasonable price. Naturally, inflation is a key pointer to, as far as the poor man is concerned, as far as the average Nigerian is concerned, to the stability of the economy. Having said this, in view of the circumstances in which we found ourselves, the Honorable Minister mentioned something, and we have mentioned it several times on this platform, about the fact that Nigeria itself has an issue, a revenue challenge. And then also subsequent comments by other participants also indicate another issue, which also strengthen that, and also the issue of foreign exchange availability and pricing and all those things that are also leading to this issue, and including security issues. Now, all of these issues are of concern, and certainly as far as any person or any Nigeria is concerned, those are issues that will affect the economy. Now, the border closure, we have quite a number of Nigerians have hailed the government for coming up with this policy in view of many things. One, in view of the fact that we were faced with a situation whereby we have our neighbors, and we are not enjoying seemingly the reciprocal arrangement that we expect from them. We expected them to be fair to us, and they have not been, and that necessitated that policy. And many people, including myself, have held that policy of closing the borders, including also challenges of security. Quite a lot of weapons are coming in. Now, it has impact on business, and especially around the border communities and all that. Now, government is saying that they are going to review that policy. If they review it and reopen the borders, I have had quite a number of comments. Some people are in support of that. Some people are even saying we're getting used to the borders being closed and there will not be any need to open them. But certainly the policy of border closure was not meant to last forever. So I believe it's time So long as we can have some form of agreement with our neighbors, we need each other. You know, for them, they have a big market in Nigeria. For us, we have a big market in West Africa. So we need the borders to be closed, to be reopened. And when they are reopened, under certain conditions, we can observe them. And I'm sure they'll have significant impact on even prices of goods and services, because some of the goods that are easily available across the borders, we are not able to get them as much as we are supposed to. And there may be, for some goods that are here that they need across the border, they will have, we may have better market and better prospects. And certainly, probably that will also impact on the GDP locally. So it's something that I think will be desirable to reopen under certain conditions, as it were.
Professor Yushua Ango, I still would like to stay with you. Now, the causative factor of this year's economic recession largely is the coronavirus pandemic and the steps that the government then took, namely the lockdown. So the economy has reopened now for all practical purposes. But as Muda Yusuf is saying, business is facing quite some challenge. Investors are foot dragging, perhaps, and then we are seeing a climb, unfortunately, in some of the very critical rates, namely Forex rate, namely rate of inflation. So what, in your opinion, needs to be done so that, as this optimism is being expressed, that fine, it will be a V-shaped recession, otherwise you plunge in and then you climb out. What needs to be done so that business can take advantage of it, so that even in the first quarter of 2021, where you expect perhaps some sluggish growth, even if it's positive territory, the growth can be accelerated?
Well, a number of things need to be done. One of them, some of them are being done already. We have seen that government came up earlier in view of COVID-19 with the Economic Sustainability Plan, which is over 2.3 or so trillion. Now, a number of measures have been done, especially pertaining to monetary authorities. They have come up with a lot of things, initiatives, funds, the growth fund, the MSE for social, small and medium enterprises, funds for various aspects are being released. Now, I think other things also that need to be done are those things that have to do with agriculture. You know, quite a number of funds are supposed to be invested in agriculture, over 600 billion, you know, to re-engineer the sector, reclaim a lot of, to get a lot of maybe hectares planted across the country, ranging from 10,000 to 100,000 hectares per state or so. This need to be done. When this came up, we said it here, also on this platform, that it was too late for this rainy season, that it is probably going to be working for the dry season and then for the next next year's rainy season. But all the same, the process should start now, you know, so as to inject those kind of funds in the economy, and I believe that will help. Another thing that probably also need to be done or to be implemented that will also have direct bearing on the economy, and especially the sustainable economy of the local persons, is the issue of like the housing projects that is supposed to be done under the Economic Sustainability Plan, which is over 400 houses per local government, using inputs and labor and resources at those local communities. All of these need to be done. I believe we are, like you said, we are going to have a V-shaped recession, but then if we do this implementation and we inject this, I think we're going to see a lot more. Government has done also a lot in terms of fiscal, fiscal measures that have been taken. The Honorable Minister mentioned quite a number of them, but one of them I note is the release of capital projects, over 1.something trillion released as agreed, you know, on time. So there is need to implement those other things, you know, also the job that is supposed to be provided to 774,000 persons. You know, all of this need to be done now in this quarter so that we begin to see really, you know, a faster end to this recession. I am confident that at the end of this year, not probably even into next year, we may even have a positive something to report.
Well, many thanks, Professor Ishao. Professor Uche, let's look at the segment of this discussion and then see what justice we can make to it before we round up. We're talking about the recession, which is prompted by COVID-19. And COVID-19 really dealt a fatal blow, I must say, to leisure industry, for instance, and then to the travel industry, to tourism, and the rest of them. But the new normal here is that, meetings are now being done online, mostly, generally, and then you find less travels as per, for government officials and some other, for other people in the industry. And you find out the new normal is now firm on the ground, that a lot more is being served as far as travels are concerned. Do you see this as being sustained, or do you see this recession as aiding this to get it sustained so that we can save much more in this sector?
Yeah, thank you. There's no doubt that at a time like this, whatever that is necessary to save costs is worthwhile. As you rightly mentioned, the recession was primarily caused by the COVID, the effect of the COVID. Of course, in a bid to contain the health crisis, the government imposed lockdowns like other governments across the world, and movement restrictions. That is what led to this contraction you saw in the activity levels. And that was why in the Q2 of 2020, at its peak, okay, we saw most activities in the negative territory. The other one also has to do with the oil price that fell, and then crude oil production. Now, and that is why, in my view, for us to do things that will now put us on a faster lane, we have to look at the causes of the recession. Recall, unlike the 2016 case, that was primarily the result of a drop in oil revenue, a situation where government revenue fell, state government couldn't even have money to pay salaries, and there was generally weak aggregate demand. Okay, this one was primarily COVID-19. So while we may not be able to control the price, and to a large extent to the output, because OPEC has given us a quota, 1.4 million barrels per day, we can look at the COVID, okay, and that is by continuing to ensure that the health crisis is contained, by continuing to put across the message that people must wear their masks and wash their hands regularly, and then continuing to open the economy. As we open the economy, of course, economic activities will open. But there is a fundamental issue, apart from even the contraction, which has been mentioned, and that is the issue of inflation. And that is why the situation we have now is more severe than even what we had in 2016, because the inflation rate, as you know, as of last month, was put at 14.23%. So it's a situation where you have rising cost of commodities, and at the same time, the economy is contracting. So it poses a major challenge. So, and I think tackling it from the inflation angle will also indirectly be addressing the issue of recession. And that's because the inflation rate we are experiencing today is coming more from the food side, from the food angle. So what do we need to do? Because the food inflation rate is above 17%. So what do we have to do? We have to start by tackling insecurity. So the first major task I see the government doing now is to be more aggressive, in the area of insecurity, even if it means, changing the, the security, tweaking the security architecture, bringing in new hands to man the, all the services. Okay, what that will do immediately is to send a signal. You send a signal to the world that you are ready to, change the narrative. So that is the one thing it will do, because people will say, changing the security chiefs, for example, wouldn't make any difference. But at least the signal would have been sent. So tackling insecurity is number one, okay? And then the government in collaboration, the federal government in collaboration with the states, okay, should now pay very close attention to this issue of food production, agriculture. Because if we don't address food, I give you an example. In Q3 of 2020, the agri sector actually disappointed in this Q3 because the agri sector grew by just 1.39%, lower than the performance it put up in Q2 at 1.58%. So the agri sector actually dropped, and this is a sector that contributes about 30% of our GDP. So what that tells us is that if we can give more attention to that sector, address this food issue, number one, you're bringing down inflation, you're making things easier for the common man, and at the same time, you're also supporting growth. The central bank has come up to say that their hands are tied. The central bank, as far as reining in inflation is concerned, appears hamstrung. The other day, the central bank governor said it. Inflation rate in this country is no more the result of monetary factors. So it is not because you have excess liquidity or whatever that you have an inflation. That the problem is supply side. Structural rigidities. Structural rigidities coming from, again, this high transport cost, for example, high cost of power. So if government can address high transport costs, and I'm happy part of the strategies to address that is what they're doing now, reducing the levies on cars that are coming in. And of course, the roads are also there, to be fixed. So address transport, address, the issue of power. That will go a long way to, support our SMEs. Now, part of why it does appear that our rate of contraction, I need to mention that, our rate of contraction is not as high as those of developed countries. In UK, for example, over 20%, in US, over 20%, is probably because we have a large number of activities, a large sector that is not captured in our GDP computation, and that is the informal sector. Sure. The informal sector is so huge in this country that if you are to capture the impact of the COVID on them, our recession would be a lot more deeper. But that is not captured. So if we...
At the same time, if you were to capture the informal sector as widely as possible, the size of our GDP will be much larger than officially is acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw that in 2014 when we had this rebasing exercise, that when we brought in new sectors like Nollywood and the rest, we saw our GDP rise. So if you now bring in the informal sector, of course the GDP will rise. So the point I'm making is that we should find a way of, number one, scale up the interventions. The central bank has done a lot in terms of development finance functions. The federal government too has done a lot, but we need to scale them up to ensure that they get to most of these small businesses. And that's why I want to suggest here that the central bank may take a second look at the possibility of allowing microfinance banks, because of their number, because of their reach, to be part of these interventions, as opposed to just using the deposit money banks for intervention. So microfinance banks can come in so that they can penetrate more to the, small businesses that really require these funds to survive.
All right, Professor Uche Waleke, thank you. Nadabo, Professor Waleke was talking about the informal sector, which is not captured. Muda Yusuf, of course, is also there, and Professor Vishal Ango. I've always been puzzled as to why in our modeling, also in our computation, we don't seem to reach deep down enough to acknowledge, recognize, and then capture the value being generated by the informal sector. I just give you an example. There are probably no major cities in Nigeria where you don't have akara sellers. Akara, that's what people will call bean cake. We all know it as akara, or kose if you are here in the north. Now, they provide, in the morning, what they serve as breakfast. If you were to compute the value, the person comes to buy 50 naira, 100 naira, on and on, around major corners. These are persons, and that's the only business they do. In the morning, of course, they would have woken up by 5 o'clock to prepare their beans and then get it blended, and then they come there with their oil, fry their akara. They generate their income, not captured anywhere. And as I said, if we were to multiply those numbers around the country, the numbers would be huge. There are a number of mama put joints all over the place that are not captured by this. But in the formal sector, I'll mention the name now, for instance. In the morning, you go to your Starbucks, you want to have your coffee. They'll put it in the cup for you like this and then give you some... some cake or cupcake or otherwise, and of course it goes into their records. So I think that this is a challenge. I'm not an economist, but a challenge for economists, challenge for financial experts. How do we begin to compute the value generated by this informal sector?
And Kingsley, still on that, when you look at that, all right, that really brings to fore the issue of those that could not be able to identify or feel as if there's a recession on the ground. And this is an informal sector too. When we talk about recession, when you tell somebody there's a recession, you begin to ask you, what is recession really? Because he has not been captured in the system and doesn't really put directly to the GDP because his figures are not there.
Yeah, informal sector again. And you can go on and on.
So many.
In the advanced countries or more regulated economies, you hear about logistics. All those alabaro, those people carry wheelbarrow, it's logistics. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with our 3 guests who are still with us and also take a peek at the tweets that have come in. You're welcome back to Good Morning Nigeria, and we're still broadcasting live from our Abuja headquarters studios. Let's return to Dr. Muda Yusuf, Director General of SCCI, that's the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Muda Yusuf, earlier you were complaining about the Forex regime and the differential between what we may loosely refer to as the official window and the other market that creates room for arbitrage. Now, we do know from experience, at least over the decades, that the FX rate is also a major driver of inflation, in addition, of course, to the power issues that we have and transportation costs, namely fuel costs and so on and so forth. What do we do about the Forex rate? Because sometimes you go, there's people, even in the informal sector, a person selling oranges might just be telling you, say, dollar, the price of dollar don't go up. We don't need dollars to come and plant oranges in our economy. I mean, one cartoonist was saying the other day that the tray that they use in hawking the orange, the tray is imported. You didn't import the tray, or you're not going to import the tray in future. But what do we do about our Forex? Is our currency under attack by speculators? And if yes, how do we fend them off?
Yeah, thank you. First, before I go into that, let me make some comments on whether the informal sector activities were captured in our GDP competition or not. I think to a reasonable extent, activities in the informal sector are captured. And I give you a basis for that. The agricultural sector accounts for about 23% of our GDP. Over 90% of the players in the agricultural sector are the small-scale farmers. They are peasant farmers. They are informal sector operators. So if you are having a 23% contribution to GDP, it's not coming from the formal sector. How many formal sector players are in agric? How many commercial farmers do we have in agric? The main drivers of agricultural sector today and agric output are the peasant farmers. They are not formal sector traders. The same is true of our distributive trade sector. You made reference to the akara seller and all of that. The distributive trade sector is one of the largest employers of labor. And I speak to you, they contribute about 16% of our GDP. And most of these traders are informal sector traders. They are the ones driving the distributive trade sector. It's not the supermarkets and all these big shops. It's all these small traders that you see all over the place. On every street, there are traders. So I think to a large extent, the activities of this informal sector operatives are captured. Now, coming back to the issue of the Forex. Now, what is happening now is that we have too many parasites in the Forex environment. And what is attracting these parasites in the system is the premium that the multiple rates create. You have a huge component of demand that are in the foreign exchange market. They are not because they have any serious business to do with foreign exchange, but because there is a premium, they want to take advantage of the premium. And in the process, they are obstructing and creating a lot of distortions for those who have very serious business to do with foreign exchange. So this is the disadvantage of these multiple rates. If you move the rates as close as possible to what you can call a market rate, then some of this, a good number of these components of demand, which is driven by speculators and people want to take advantage of the premium, those components will disappear. So we know that we are dealing strictly with those who have genuine business to do with the foreign exchange. That is one. Secondly, we need to have a supply side strategy. Because the strategy we are adopting so far is a demand side strategy, it's a demand management strategy. That is managing demand, ensuring that there is no pressure in foreign exchange and so on and so forth. But if you have a rate that is market rate, people who want to bring in Forex will gladly bring it in easily. Now, let me tell you, the official rate at which investors can bring Forex into the country today is about 386. The market rate is about 480. Now even getting close to 500. How do you want people to bring in the foreign exchange? Because they can argue that if I bring the foreign exchange at 386, if I want to take it out, I'll be taking it out at 500. That's a major shortfall. So this is why we say that as much as possible, if we eliminate these multiple rates, then we can have some targeted interventions. Because in any economy, there's what we call market failure. We identify areas that the market is penalizing that are critical, and we intervene to support them, either through some fiscal policies or whatever. That is what should happen to make sure that we bring some confidence into the foreign exchange market. Now some exporters, because their export proceeds will be converted at 386, before you know, some of them will be moving their export outside the country. They go and be exporting from Ghana and the neighboring countries. We have had this in the past. Because they feel that it is not fair on them. They work hard, they export, they bring in their foreign exchange, then you ask them to sell it at 386. That is a complete negation of our desire to promote exports. So my proposition is that we should, and this is what is even contained in the economic sustainability plan. That is what is there, that as much as possible, we should unify the exchange rate so that we can bring some stability and normalcy to the rate. We'll be able to remove the components that of people who are just there because of the premium. We'll be able to encourage people who want to bring in foreign exchange, either their diaspora remittances, either their FDIs, either their portfolio investors, either their export policies. They will feel more inclined to bring in such money. And we should have a whole strategy around attracting foreign exchange outside of oil. There should be a strategy. The strategy now is to focus on demand. We should have a strategy to boost supply of foreign exchange. The minister talked earlier about the issue of liquidity and so on. We can incorporate that into part of the strategy to boost the supply side. So that is my submission around.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Muda. Let's hear your views, Professor Yushao Ango, about the issues raised by Dr. Muda there, talking about the Forex, talking about what government should do. When you put this side by side with the economic sustainability plan of the federal government, and of course with 2.3 trillion naira there for it to use and implementation has really gotten started, how do you see this playing out? How would this plan really, address some of these issues raised by Dr. Muda there?
I was just wondering, just before you show another book, Professor Yusha, just before you take that question, I would like you to also respond to this component of my question to Dr. Muda. Namely, why is it that since the introduction of the second-tier foreign exchange market system in 1986, dealing with the naira and the dollar has created these never-ending or never-disappearing parasites? Because if you recall, about 25, 30 years ago, it was said that, the reason why we are having some challenges with our Forex had to do with the fact that there was a differential between the official rate and the parallel rate, and that the differential should not be more than 5% or some percentage. It keeps growing and growing and growing. And I ask the question, is our currency under attack?
This is a very good question, and I believe also what Dr. Muda had presented is a real problem, especially the fact that we're trying to manage demand side of it. We're not managing the supply side of it very well. But however, my own view, as far as the disparity between the two rates is concerned, is that so long as the model we are operating remain the same, this disparity will never be removed, from what we experience in Nigeria. Every time we try to move, many times before, government, especially through the central bank, had made attempt to merge the two rates or bring them as close as possible. And by bringing them as close as possible, what they do basically is to raise the official rate. By raising the official rate to catch up with the so-called black market or parallel rate, what usually happens is that the parallel market or the black market rate will move on, will move further. And this is what has been happening all along. As long as we do not manage the supply side of it, and the supply side of it, we realize that the official rate or the official sources are not adequate. They can never be adequate to address the real needs of, especially given the nature of our economy, where we depend so much on imported things. We have said it here and elsewhere that right from 1970, when our test changes to everything foreign, it's not only raw materials that we bring in. I wish it is only raw materials that we bring in, which means in that sense we just support the industries. But in reality, a lot of things we bring in for comfort, and things like that. So our test changed. We don't have enough. We are depending on oil. And oil, as it is, as we have seen, is something that oscillates. The prices, even as we have seen also recently, even the quantum we can export is limited. Now, but meanwhile, so we don't have enough resources of foreign exchange. So every now and then, so long as we have not managed the supply side, we'll have challenges. Now, how do we manage the supply side of it? Dr. Muda had offered some of the suggestions. Now, quite a lot of quantum of funds now come into Nigeria through these diaspora remittances. We are beginning to realize that it's a huge source itself. Now, there are two ways. One way is just to merge it, so that whatever it is, government removes its hands and it plays in the parallel market so that, you sell on demand and supply, no protection or whatsoever. Now, if we do that, we Nigerians are the ones that will now come and say and compare our foreign currency rate before and what it is now at any point in time and show as if government is not doing the right thing. I think what we need to do, in addition to ensuring that we manage the supply side, is also for Nigerians to change their taste. And we have tried to promote the idea that at least if nobody will consume Nigerian produced things, government itself, whatever is available in Nigeria, they should try to patronize Nigerian made products, at least government. Now allow every other person to go anywhere and buy whatever they want to buy, but let them source for their own foreign exchange. But my own position is that every time you shift the goalpost in trying to merge these funds under the current arrangement, then what will happen is that one will also move. Since we don't have sufficient foreign exchange, government alone cannot protect the rate. So I don't know. We have to really do what Dr. Muda said, try now and manage the supply side rather than just the demand side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yusha Ango. Professor Uche Waleke, there are a number of issues on the table. What are your reactions?
Okay, thank you. The first is a reaction to the argument that the informal sector is largely captured in the GDP. I still think otherwise, because my understanding of the informal sector are businesses, a number of businesses, largely one-man businesses, here and there, that don't have records. They don't have records, and that is also part of why we have this challenge with our tax-to-GDP ratio, because if they had records and they were captured in the tax net, for example, tax-to-GDP ratio wouldn't be 6%. So, and you come to think of it, how is this GDP computed? We say it's the monetary value of final goods and services produced in an economy, monetary value. So for you to attach value, there has to be some sort of record. And for the MBS computes the GDP as gross output less intermediate consumption. So you have to have records of something before you can say this is the GDP. So the person that grows, maybe has a farm behind and then sells the proceeds to neighbors around will not be captured. The Forknizer, these one-man people, they don't have records. And so there's no way they can be captured in the official GDP computation. That is my take. The second thing has to do with, the second issue raised has to do with the Forex thing. As I mentioned, is about demand and supply. And the challenge, I'm not holding brief for the central bank. The central bank is, yes, in the process of unifying the exchange rate, but it has to be a gradual thing. It's not something that will happen overnight. And that's because if you do it overnight, for example, exchange rate will shoot up. And as we speak, there are a number of imports now that are highly subsidized, one of which is even this petroleum imports that we do. The other day, the Minister of State for Petroleum, Seva, said that yes, subsidy has gone, but the subsidy that is still there now is that one that coming from the exchange rate, because fuel is imported at a subsidized exchange rate than what should have been. So the point is this: if we overnight unify exchange rates, in other words, say let's market forces determine exchange rates, the inflation rate that we have today in the near term will worsen. So the best approach is, again, to manage it as the central bank is trying to do, managing demand, and while we gradually expand the supply. So to me, it's a gradual process. It's not going to be a sudden event.
Many thanks, Professor Uche Waleke. Professor Uche Waleke is a professor of capital market with the Nasarawa State University and a former commissioner of finance, Imo State. We thank you so much for appearing on the program today.
You're welcome.
Dr. Muda Yusuf, Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, it's our pleasure you've been with us. We thank you so much. And so also is Professor Isha Ango from Kaduna, a professor of finance and entrepreneurship, Kaduna State University. It's our pleasure you've been with us. Thank you so very much. And that was Good Morning Nigeria for you today. We had some tweets, but all the same, Dele Jackson, Chris Simeon, Lo Alpha, and the rest of them, we thank you so much for watching our program. It's been Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you. I am Yusuf Nadabus.
Program returns tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. Until then, do have a lovely day. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.